Ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
Are you ready?
Okay, here we go.
You're listening to the Deal Room Podcast. Join us as we bring you the inside scoop on business sales and acquisitions. Get across trends in the area and hear the industry's best recount their real-life tips, traps, and experiences. Now, here's your host, Joanna Oakey.
Hi, it's Joanna Oakey here and welcome back to the Deal Room Podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by a commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. Now, today we have another episode in our innovation series, this time speaking to the fabulous Vanessa Lovie, the Managing Director of Bsale.com. Now, Bsale, if you're not already aware, is one of Australia's leading sites for business sales, news and information. For over 20 years, they've been in the business of connecting buyers and sellers. And given Vanessa and her team have worked for these 2 decades with thousands of buyers and sellers of businesses and business brokers, I really wanted to get her onto the podcast to drill into things that I think are very relevant to the progression and change within the industry over time and the trends that are coming up into the future. So in this discussion, Vanessa and I chat about the main ways that Bsale get inquiries. We talk about their journey in the business sale industry space and their current innovation projects and opportunities for innovation that exist in the business sale and acquisition industry, which, of course, is one of my favourite topics, innovation. And Vanessa also shares her take on the current market condition for business sales. So this has a lot in it. Without further ado, here's our very insightful discussion with Vanessa. Vanessa, it is so fabulous to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming along today.
Thank you, Jo. It's so lovely to be here. I'm excited.
I am excited too. I'm always excited, but I am very excited to talk about these topics because when we get talking, boy, oh boy, do we get talking.
Yes.
And I think we both share a real passion and love for this industry, and I guess sort of sitting on it, from the perspective of service providers into the industry, obviously we've always got loads to talk about. So I barely even know where to start with all of this. But what I'd like to do actually is just for you to give maybe just a 1 or 2 minute quick snapshot of your history in the industry, because I think this is one of the things many people don't fully understand, just how long you've been in this industry for, and how much you've seen in the industry. So just really quick snapshot.
Yeah, of course. So Bsale.com.au is the website that we own. It's a business and franchise for sale website, and we started back in 2000. So we've been here nearly 23 years this year. Basically, our site, it hosts businesses and franchises for sale that has been listed by brokers, business owners, franchise groups, franchisees. So basically, over the last 23 years, we've seen a lot of things happen. We've seen a lot of sites come and go, but we're still here, and we're still, we're here for it.
Love it. Yes. Well, and some interesting years we have had in the very recent past, indeed. And we might get to some of that in a moment in terms of, I guess the opportunities right now, how the market's faring. But let's start back, I guess, at the basics. So when a small business owner is thinking about selling a business, what are the main ways that they can get inquiries? How do they find buyers?
Mm-hmm. So I guess when a business owner gets to that point that they're ready to sell, obviously they need to prepare that business for sale. A better prepared business is obviously going to obtain a better sale price. When they're going through that process, they also need to come up with a strategy about how they're going to sell that business. There's obviously a few different ways to go about it. They can approach a competitor. They may get a better sale price going to a competitor, especially if they can realize the potential and the time that it takes to market, to gain that market share, to obtain the clients that you have within your business. You can also sell within your own circle. So you can sell to your customers, you can sell to your team members, you can sell to colleagues, you can sell to allied businesses. And then the third business is to go to open market, which is to place it on websites like bsale.com.au and to send it out to buyers' databases. At the moment, I'd say there's 5 to 6 major business for sale websites that you can place your listing on. So whether you're selling your business privately or going with a business broker, it's very important to get it onto these 6 major sites because that's where the buyers are.
Fascinating. Okay, and get it onto all the sites. I'm hearing your
100%.
suggestion being there. Okay.
Yeah. Our space is very different to real estate. I think if you look at the real estate sector, realestate.com and Domain, they pretty much dominate the real estate sector. So if you're on those two websites, you're going to get a lot of the inquiries. But with business sales, it's very different. The people who are looking to buy businesses are different. The price points are different. There's everything from 50,000 to 15 million. There's so many different price points, and the person looking to buy the business is very different. So when you go to sell a business, that's why there's like 5 to 6 major websites, because all of these websites cater to different people, different industries, different sectors, which is why it's important to be on all of those 5 to 6 sites.
Great point. And I know you have Bsale Market Insights. What's that all about?
So the Market Insights gives you an idea of the average price that businesses are listed for sale, either based on category. So there's cafes, restaurants, building and construction, also based on capital cities. So you can look at Sydney, Melbourne, also go to the States, New South Wales, etc. They gave you an idea, I guess, of what is currently on the market and what you could, potentially list your business for sale for. What's kind of interesting, though, in the business for sale sector is there's so much confidentiality. So while you can look at these data and be like, okay, cafes, if we take a look at cafes, for instance, there's 3,000 cafes for sale. It's got nearly $1 billion worth of value in the marketplace, and the average price is nearly $300,000. So it gives you a guide, of what cafes are selling for, what's out there, average price. But there's also a lot of confidentiality in this space. So when people list a business for sale, we in the back end can see what it's listed for, because we need to, organise our listings. But that necessarily isn't, a clear indication, because maybe this cafe has been listed a few different times. Maybe they listed it privately. Maybe they listed it with a broker. Maybe a particular broker has gone and listed it a couple of times, because they don't have to put up the address. They don't have to say it's on, 1 George Street, Sydney. There is that level of confidentiality, which means that data is never, ever going to be 100% accurate with business sales, which, we'll tap into appraisals later. But that's what kind of makes it difficult to get clear indications of the data, is that there is so much confidentiality.
Yeah, absolutely. But, just listening to you, I can hear how much data you must be processing there.
There's a lot of data there.
Yeah. And data's key, isn't it? So anyway, I feel like there's another 6 podcasts in that one.
Well, we love to talk. So
that's it. And look, a lot of what we're talking about today, relates to innovation. And, I love innovation. Innovation is one of the core values here at Aspect Legal. Constantly looking at ways that we can innovate the way we provide our services, but also business. I find the business sale and acquisition market is a market that is so ripe for innovation. You must have seen a heap of change over the last 2 decades and a lot of opportunities. So if we start with sort of the change, what I guess does 2 decades in the business sale industry look like from your eyes, from your perspective?
Yeah, 100%. So back when we started, back in 2000, newspaper was king. Where we live, so we're on the Central Coast, which is about 2 hours north of Sydney. Where we live there, we had local newspaper, we had Sydney newspaper, and that was basically the only way to really advertise businesses for sale or to try and buy a business. Back then, business broking wasn't big either. So real estate agents were the main point of contact for somebody wanting to buy and sell a business, and there just wasn't enough, exposure. So back then, my mum actually went and started Bsale. She learned front page, she built it from scratch. And that was when dial-up was happening. So you'd be sitting there waiting for the dial-up to happen. And, that's kind of when Bsale was launched. And then over the years, at that point, realestate.com was building and it was getting bigger. It had a business arm called Real Businesses. And it was kind of, it was the king in this space at that time. In about 2014, Real Business decided to close its doors and it just went to focus on realestate.com and Real Commercial. So they kind of left our space. When they left this space, it opened up the doors for more business for sale websites to come and more to be launched, which, competition is great. There's nothing wrong with that. So more, business for sale websites came into this space. And then today, I'd say, as I mentioned before, there's about 5 to 6 major sites that have the traffic. And these 5 to 6 major sites, you can find them easily. If you just, Google business for sale Sydney, business for sale Melbourne, you'll see who's on the front page. And these are the sites that you need to be on as a buyer and seller. Obviously, over that time as well, what's happened is there's a lot more business brokers. There's been a lot more education in this space, a lot more understanding about what makes a business broker different to a real estate agent, even though the licensing in most states is the same. Like you have to be licensed as a real estate agent, and then they add on some business broking as well. And that's kind of how the licensing is working. There's still a lot of difference in a business broker's skill set and what they bring to the table and how they understand business. So I think in the last, especially the last, 5 years, there's been a lot more education around what a business broker does, what they bring to the table, and, why a business owner should be approaching them.
Fascinating. Actually, we had a podcast just recently with Max and Mike talking about, I think they were talking about like 5-6 decades in the industry. Just fascinating, to hear how the industry and how brokers as a whole have, their role has changed and the understanding of the market, of the complexity of business sales has changed as well, because it is a complex environment. The funny thing is even, really small business sales can often be quite complex. And, sellers, buyers perhaps just don't really understand that until they get started down the path.
Yeah. And I think it's great as well what the AIBB is doing. They're focusing a lot more on education these days. And there's a lot more, if a business broker joins the AIBB, that they go through that onboarding process, whether they've been a broker for, 10 years or 10 days, they all have to go through that initial onboarding process, which helps with the professionalism of business broking. It helps, solidify that profession and helps, make sure they're all kind of on the same page in terms of how to actually go through the process and how to assist clients, which is it's great to see. It's really good to see.
Yeah, it is. It is, absolutely. And actually, it's funny that you talk about going through the process and going through the systems, because it's a funny thing. It's also the case from a legal perspective in working in business sales that there is very little clear defined processes that are in place to train lawyers as a whole, which I find fascinating. We've created some really detailed processes internally, but this is something that's not been available in the market prior to now. It's just like, it's a fascinating industry, complex deals, but not this clear strategy, and process from so many elements of the process.
And I think that's so interesting, because if you look at business sales as well, like they're not all just in capital cities. We have businesses that sell out in country towns, in small towns. And if you think about your country pub, it can be selling for, especially if it includes a commercial aspect, it can be $1 million sale plus. And, solicitors in that area are maybe not equipped to deal with that kind of sale, which is why I think it's so important. It's why we continually advocate that if people are buying or selling a business, they have to go to a commercial lawyer, because there's just that understanding that, a general, solicitor or conveyancer just doesn't understand, or they're going to miss something. And you don't want them to miss something when you're talking about such a big asset.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, of course, I completely agree. So on that concept of innovation then, I'm interested to hear what you're doing at the moment that's innovative. I see you a bit of an innovative thought leader in the area, and I'd love to talk about what some of those things are that you're doing at the moment. So hit us with it. What's your processes that you're looking at?
So I'm always full of ideas. I'm one of those, it's got to be that business owner mindset, right? That entrepreneurial, always thinking of ideas, always thinking of things. And I think for us, so if you have a look at, let's say, the listings on Bsale, a lot of the listings, if you look at those market insights, a lot of them are in the sub 500,000. And like we said before, there's not always the access to the right solicitors that know how to deal with that transaction. So one of the innovations we want to look at is kind of streamlining that process to help people who are selling a business, let's say sub 500,000, how to go through that whole process of, confidentiality agreements, term sheets, contract of sale, because that's what gets the business sold. Like, yes, there's a negotiation. Yes, there's finding the buyer, but without this legal work, the business doesn't get sold. And that's also when the deal can fall through, is when they're going through that due diligence, when they're going through that process. So in terms of sellers, we want to help sellers in that space so that they can, it's a clearer process than what's currently available. There's also, if we go, I'll look at the buyer's side as well, there's a lot more work that can be done with buyers. Buyers, it's really interesting because if a buyer isn't ready to buy, the sale's going to fall through. If they don't have their finances in order, if they don't understand the process, I think a lot of the time buyers, it depends on the buyer, right? Like they can be buying their first business. They could have been a business owner, sold, rebuying. They could be, a company looking at mergers and acquisitions. It depends on their, level of understanding. But I think, especially this time of year with New Year's resolutions, people are out there looking, to buy a job, to change their careers. We get the highest traffic in January just because of New Year's resolutions. Whether these are the real buyers and whether they actually buy a business or they're just dreaming of a different life, it's those people that need that help and need that education. Because if buyers aren't actually fully committed and they're just daydreamers, we call them tire kickers, then it wastes so many people's time. So there's also a lot of innovation to be done to take care of buyers, to help buyers understand how much money they can actually access, what type of business is right for them. Like if they've never made a coffee in their life, is it why they're looking at a cafe for sale? You might want to think it's a great idea to go and buy a cafe in a country town, but if you've never worked a day in a cafe, maybe try that first. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of work there to do with buyers as well in terms of innovation. And then I think the other innovation is it's around education. There's still so much education to be done, especially like if we go back to the sellers again. When they're selling a business, the first thing they want to know is what can I get for my business? That's always the first point. The first point should be how do I prepare my business for sale? Because, preparation can take 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, depending on the size of the business, the issues, how to actually take that owner out of the business, how to, if you're running a bakery and you're in the bakery 60 hours a week, you're limiting who your buyers can be. Like your buyers basically have to be another baker unless you can find a way to move yourself out of the business, put somebody else in as the head baker, and, then you can maybe open it up to investors. You can open it up to other buyers. You can, you've got to strategically think about your business and how you're going to sell this asset that you have. So there's that whole preparation work around it. And then obviously you want to know what you're going to get for it. And the interesting thing with appraisals is, let's say you want to go with a business broker. There is this issue in the industry that if you go and approach a business broker, I guarantee in that conversation somewhere the broker says to you, what do you want to get for this business? And I'd say 9 out of 10 business owners have a number in their head. They'd be like, oh, I want to retire. I want to go buy a, Land Cruiser. I want to get a caravan. I want to go around Australia. Oh, I need 300,000 or I need 500,000 or whatever it is. And at some point that'll come up in the conversation. So then when a business broker will go to do the appraisal, it'll somehow come back around about that figure because they want the listing. But a lot of the time, the business owner's idea of what their business is worth is often inflated. They often, there's that emotional attachment. I had to deal with those difficult clients. I had to source this product. Oh, the work I did, the sleepless nights. Like business owners, we all understand it. Like it's hard work and we feel like we want to get paid for that hard work. But unless the figures are there, the business is not going to sell for that value, right? So there's issues around appraisals and how we can make that appraisal process better and how it can be more like instead of just the broker trying to get the listing and then later on dealing with the pricing issues, how can we get better appraisals? Because the issue is, like I said before, is confidentiality. A lot of businesses for sale, either you don't really know the real price they're selling for, you don't know the real price they sold for. You don't even really know where that cafe is because it was never said exactly where it was when it was put onto market. There's so much confidentiality. So getting comparables is difficult. Getting sold data is difficult. The AIBB is doing a good job in trying to get that sold data, but it's not as easy as real estate. You can't just go look at what the 4-bedroom, house up the road sold for. It's not that easy. So there's this, inherent problem with appraisals that I think, it just needs work. It's one of these, it needs looking at.
And what are your ideas for how that can be changed? Obviously, I totally agree. It's a problem. Hard one to solve, though.
Yeah.
What are some of your ideas?
It's a hard one to solve because it's always been there, and I think it'll always be there because of the confidentiality issue. I have ideas about how we could address it, and it's one of these business brokers all need to work together because I think what happens is to get the listings, business brokers work against each other. So they'll tell a business owner, our business is worth 500,000 to get the listing. The broker up the road is like, I can definitely 400 max. And as a business owner, you're like, well, if he's saying 500, that's better. So business owners are also kind of, they're going to go for the highest value. Then maybe it goes on the market for 6 months. And then they're like, oh no, we're going to drop it to 400. The original broker is like, I told you that from the start, but you didn't want to hear my advice. So it's a really interesting thing to face. Like real estate agents argue it better because they've got comparables. Business sales, it's very hard to get comparables. So I have ideas on how we can address it. And I think this year we'll probably come out with some of those ideas. But it's an
coming
interesting
back to
one.
That data point, isn't it? Vanessa? Coming back to the data point here.
It's all about those numbers, right?
Okay, well, let's get on to having a quick chat about the market then. How do you think the market is faring at the moment?
Well, it's the start of the year. And the start of the year is always that excitement, right? It's always like, what are we going to do this year? What are we going to achieve? How are we going to, what's going to make a difference to us this year? So obviously traffic's high at the moment with buyers looking.
Yeah, and on that, because you mentioned that before, that that this is the trend for the highest, January being the highest month of buyer activity.
Yeah.
Can you see in your figures the types of businesses that are getting that activity? So is it the buyer job market, or is it the a bigger size business market? Is it all of them, or is it only one of the segments?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing. We can see it, but when you look at businesses for sale, it's so skewed. Like if you look at the hospitality industry, cafes, takeaways, restaurants, they have, restaurants, I'm just quickly looking at the data. Restaurants there's 2,500 listings, 3,000 takeaways, 3,000 cafes and coffee shops. Even if you try to compare, you're kind of trying to compare like apples with, I don't know, cheesecake. You can't compare it, because even if there's increased interest, right, in the building and construction, there's always got to be more people looking at cafes just because of the sheer number of cafes available, if that makes sense. So it's very, hard to compare. If you've got 4-bedroom houses, a lot of 4-bedroom houses, but you know what I mean? Like trying to compare different industries when there's different numbers for sale. Like there's a lot more hospitality and a lot less building and construction, or a lot less cleaning, or a lot less. It's very hard to compare.
I guess it'd be interesting to see, whether or not that buyer inquiry per industry type changes, seasonally, as well.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Anyway, there's some data points as well.
There's another data to look at.
I know. Yeah. Okay, all right. So January is the hottest time for buyer activity. Looks like across the board, without getting granular in the data, which might be available at some point soon. And what else? What else are you seeing?
I think what's really interesting, I guess, if you talk about the market as a whole, it's interesting to see if you look at, let's say, business broking, there's some big movements happening with business broking. They're doing very good jobs at, I guess, increasing education, trying to educate business owners. There's a lot of podcasts coming, a lot of YouTube channels, a lot of, ebooks and things coming out with people, business brokers trying to share their expertise, which is a great thing, because I think the more that can be shared, the more that business owners can make better decisions.
Yeah.
And I think this year will be a good year. I think we finally, I think COVID spurred on a lot of this education, because people are like, everyone's going online. There's so much more online tech. There's so much more to be done. So this year, I think it's going to be a very good year for business sales. There's also a lot of talk around, because obviously interest rates are going up, there's inflation. It means that you can also, when investors are looking, they can start making more money out of buying a business than either going into real estate. And everyone's talking about real estate plateauing now, or real estate's going down. So investors are looking at other ways, and business is one of those key ways, because business, it's still doing well. It doesn't necessarily get affected. It depends on the industry, right? Like it depends, like during COVID, some businesses flew. Like if you did PPEs, if you were in that space, business flew, Zoom flew. Like there was businesses that flew and then businesses that struggled. So it's the same now, right? Like inflation might be an issue, interest rates might be rising, but there's still businesses doing very well.
Yeah.
So investors are looking at buying businesses. And this year will be a good year for investors to be looking at business.
We're certainly seeing a really buoyant market right now. We are seeing a lot at the moment, a lot of activity going on. And I was actually, I'm the world's most eternal optimist, but I was getting a bit worried there last year for a while. I was thinking, I'm getting a bit annoyed with this, the event after event, COVID, and then wars, and now inflation, and you name it, issues getting access to finance for businesses, those sorts of things. But so I was just like, it'll be interesting to watch the space. My early indications on the year are, I actually think it's looking really buoyant, and fingers crossed it continues. We all cross our fingers on that one.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say, that's why also I think it's so important when I was talking before about innovation on the buyer's side, because buyers need to be aware of what they can actually borrow. Like a lot of businesses, they need finance. Like there's no point going through due diligence and looking at a business unless you're certain, or at least certain to an extent, about how much finance you can borrow, because it's all still got to be based on your personal circumstances. Yes, it's based on the business you're buying, but a lot of the time it's based on whether you've got equity in your home, whether you've got enough money in the bank, how you're going to actually finance to buy that business. And yes, there's earn-out periods. Yes, there's, other options, and also like your experience. Like if you've got 20 years experience in food production, you're pretty well probably set to buy a food production business, but maybe you're not set to buy a building company. But as a buyer, you need to have an understanding. How much money do I actually have? Why am I looking at $1 million business when I cannot get access to that kind of finance? So I think that's also an important point, that's also what can help, this market is the buyers understanding what they're actually capable of buying.
Oh, I 100% agree. We've had, towards the end of last year, we had a number of deals that fell over just because of finance. It's just a huge waste of everyone's time, time and effort. And, it's very painful. It's very painful for sellers. It's very painful for buyers. It's painful for everyone. So, it's an issue that needs to be solved. And I think it's problematic because some of these businesses, great businesses, would have worked really well with the buyers who are on them, but just had issues accessing finance. So
I'm just going to say one other important point on that I think as well is when somebody's selling a business, they need to be prepared for the long process. I feel like a lot of sellers don't understand how long it takes. Like by the time you've prepared your business for sale, it goes to market. It can be 6 months, 9 months, 12 months until you've got a buyer and you've actually got the sale. And as a business owner, you need some really gumption to get through those months. Like if sales start to drop off, like if you've put a manager in place and you've stepped out of the business and your sales start to drop, guess what's going to happen? The buyer is not going to want to pay the price that they originally wanted to pay. So I think as well, sellers need to be ready and be like, okay, this is going to be a hard year. Just set your mindset. If it's going to be a hard year to market it, to find the buyers, go through due diligence, get over the line. Because if you let it dwindle off in those months, because a lot of, business owners, it's natural. You get burnt out, you get sick of it. You don't want to serve another customer. You don't want to deal with your team. You just get tired and you get this burnout. But owners have to be careful not to let that happen. And owners have to be ready for that whole year, just mindset of a year slog. If you sell it quicker, great. It's a bit of a holiday, right? But if not, you've got to be ready for that year. And I think that's a big point as well. Because like you said, your deals fell over because of finance. Then what's going to happen? The seller is still having to sit on the market. They're going to have to go back to market. They're going to have to keep running that business. It's not like a house. You have a 4-bedroom house and you don't sell it, you just left it sitting there. But if you don't sell your business has to keep running. Yeah.
Look, totally agree. Deal fatigue is there and it is real, but also fatigue of the business. You need to keep it running and strong so that if plan A doesn't work out, you've still got a real strength for plan B, C and D sometimes needed. I say have lots of plans. Okay. All right. Well, look, huge thank you, Vanessa, for coming on to the show today. Just why don't you give us just a really quick download of what Bsale is and how our listeners can get in contact with you.
So basically Bsale is a business for sale website. Our clients are business brokers, owners, franchise groups. They come and advertise on Bsale. But we're very much as well into this education space these days. So if you're owning a business and you're thinking about exiting or buying or selling or basically anything in that transactional period, we're all here for it. We have a bi-monthly magazine that comes out by business brokers. There's professional advice in there. Our hub is full of advice. So we're very much about education in this space and then also obviously connecting buyers with sellers.
Love it. Okay. And how can they contact you? How can our listeners get in contact?
Just go to bsale.com.au or reach out on any of our socials or LinkedIn and our team will be there.
Excellent. Okay, wonderful. We will obviously link through to that in our show notes. So if you are running along the beach off your luck right now or on your commute into work, don't worry. The traffic, I'm sure, will clear soon. But we also have links in our notes so you can go when you are ready, go and click through and make contact with Vanessa and Bsale. Vanessa, I just want to say a huge thank you for coming into the show today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Jo.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Deal Room podcast. We hope you're now primed for your next deal with these pointers and have enjoyed these fascinating insights. Now, if you'd like more information about this topic, then head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com, where you'll be able to download a transcript of this episode, as well as access any contact details and any other additional information we referred to in today's podcast. Now, if you'd like to get in contact with our guests today and the services they offer, you can go ahead and check out our show notes for a link right through to them and their details. You can also book in directly with our legal eagles at Aspect Legal if you'd like to soundboard your next steps, discuss a legal question, or find out more how we can assist, whether that's with buying or selling a business, or perhaps somewhere in between. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the Deal Room podcast on your favourite podcast player to get notifications whenever a new episode is out. We'd also love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review and rating if you're already one of our subscribers, or even if you're listening to this podcast for the very first time. Every review helps our team produce valuable content for you. Well, thanks again for listening in. You've been listening to Joanna Oakey and the Deal Room podcast, a podcast proudly brought to you by our commercial legal practice, Aspect Legal. See you next time. I am so very excited to announce that I've hit a non-podcast related milestone and released a book. You might wonder why? Simple. I wanted to help business owners understand the mechanics of deal making and the interaction between three critical phases of business: acquisition, growth, and exit. And so I am very happy to announce Buy, Grow, Exit, a guidebook for business owners and their advisors on how to buy, grow, and guess what? Exit in a way that maximizes value and avoids landmines along the way. The book is available now, so just head over to buygrowexit.com.au to get your copy and to access a whole heap of free resources that will really help you on your journey of acquisition, growth, and exit in your business or in working with your clients. Also, check out our show notes where we will link straight through to that page.
Ladies and gentlemen.
That will conclude this evening's entertainment.
Thanks for listening to the Deal Room podcast. To find out more about this episode and other episodes in the series, check out the show notes or head over to our website at thedealroompodcast.com.au.